Welcome, beautiful Sigma ladies. Control a free woman and you'll spend eternity fighting her silence. It's funny, people still believe Sigma females can be managed, as if a mind built on independence can be programmed like a social app. Here's a fact. Studies show that women with dominant autonomy traits are 74% less likely to stay in environments that suppress their individuality. Translation: you can't cage what was born allergic to obedience. When people try to control a Sigma female, they don't just meet resistance. They meet reflection. Every manipulation, every subtle attempt to steer her, gets silently dismantled with the precision of someone who has already seen through 1,000 games. She won't argue, she won't beg, and she definitely won't play along for long. She'll just look at you like you're trying to leash lightning, and somehow expecting it to thank you. The truth is, trying to control a Sigma female isn't domination, it's demolition, not of her, but of the illusion that anyone ever could. And the reactions she gives when someone dares to try, they're not emotional explosions, they're psychological earthquakes, quiet, calculated, and unforgettable. Brace yourself, because what comes next will show you exactly why controlling a Sigma female is the fastest way to lose control of yourself. Number 1. She upgrades her emotional firewall. After surviving attempts to control her, a Sigma female doesn't just move on, she evolves. Every manipulation she's endured rewires her instincts. She studies behavior patterns like a quiet scientist who's tired of being the experiment. By the time she's healed, her emotional system has upgraded itself into something almost impossible to deceive. She no longer ignores red flags. She hears them before they even wave. It's not paranoia. It's precision born from experience. Her new awareness doesn't come from bitterness. It comes from mastery. She's learned that control always hides behind politeness, that manipulation often wears the mask of care, and that love without respect is just emotional surveillance. So she stops getting flattered by attention. She starts analyzing intention. Before people even finish their second sentence, she's already detected the tone, the rhythm, and the subtle power plays underneath their words. That's why so many find her hard to get close to. It's not that she's cold, it's that she's already decoded their motives before they could finish pretending. The Sigma female's emotional firewall isn't built from fear, it's built from clarity. She no longer absorbs people's projections or feels guilty for saying no. Her empathy has boundaries now. Her intuition works like radar, catching manipulation before it even becomes visible. The kind of person who once made her doubt herself now only makes her yawn. And that's what confuses manipulators the most. They can't emotionally hook what no longer bites. Every lesson she learned becomes part of her quiet strength. She forgives, but she never forgets the data. She may give you a chance, but she no longer gives away access without testing your energy first. And when she senses control, she doesn't fight it. She simply disconnects. No drama, no warning, no explanation. Just a quiet end that leaves people wondering how they lost someone they never truly had. Her upgraded intuition becomes her superpower. It keeps her grounded, discerning, and untouchable. And that's the ultimate revenge. She doesn't just escape manipulation, she becomes immune to it. Once you've tried to control a Sigma female, you don't just lose her. You teach her how to make sure no one ever gets that close again. Number 2, she makes her freedom look unreachable. When a Sigma female reaches the point where her freedom looks unreachable, it's not an act, it's evolution. She's been through enough control, manipulation, and emotional games to realize that peace is the real luxury. So she builds a life that runs on self-leadership. She doesn't move to impress anyone, doesn't adjust her values to be liked, and doesn't negotiate her independence for comfort. It's not pride, It's self-respect, refined through pain. And once she's built that world, you can sense it in her energy. Untouchable, grounded, and absolutely uninterested in being owned. Her freedom isn't loud or rebellious. It's quiet, steady, and sacred. It's in the way she doesn't explain herself anymore, how she can say no without defending it, and how she carries peace in rooms that feed on chaos. People who once thrived on control get disoriented around her because she gives them nothing to grab onto, no emotional reaction, no insecurity to exploit, no desire to please. Her autonomy becomes a mirror that exposes how dependent others are on power games. The irony is that her freedom doesn't make her unreachable by distance, but by depth. She lives at a frequency where control cannot breathe. She's still kind, still open-hearted, but she gives from choice, not obligation. That difference makes people nervous. Some call her intimidating. Others say she's detached. But in truth, she's just free in ways most people aren't brave enough to be. Sigma females don't build walls. They build standards. They don't isolate out of fear. They separate out of clarity. And when people try to penetrate that calm, they realize too late that control doesn't work on someone who needs nothing from them. That's what makes her freedom feel unreachable. It's not because she's avoiding connection, but because she's mastered self-possession. Her life becomes a silent rebellion against everything that once tried to confine her. She walks through the world as living proof that power doesn't have to dominate. It can simply exist. The kind of freedom she holds can't be bought, begged for, or broken. It's the kind you earn only after losing everything that once tried to own you. Number 3. She removes her value from the equation. When a Sigma female removes her value from the equation, the entire power dynamic collapses like a house built on sand. Control only works when someone needs something: validation, security, approval, or belonging. But once she realizes that her worth isn't tied to what anyone can give or withhold, the game ends instantly. She stops trying to be understood, stops trying to please, and stops measuring herself by anyone's reactions. That's when she becomes uncontrollable, not because she's rebellious, but because she's self-contained. She learns early that dependency is the leash control uses. Emotional manipulation, guilt, financial dominance, they all rely on making someone believe they need you. So she dismantles that illusion piece by piece. She becomes her own provider, her own motivator, and her own comfort. She builds a life that doesn't rely on someone else's stability, and in doing so, she quietly dismantles the architecture of manipulation. When people realize they can't bribe her with affection or threaten her with loss, they lose all leverage. Emotionally, she becomes her own validation system. She no longer seeks approval to confirm her worth. She defines it herself. Financially, she learns that independence isn't just about money. It's about the confidence to walk away from anything that insults her peace. Spiritually, she grounds herself so deeply in her purpose that no amount of emotional baiting can pull her off balance. That combination makes her dangerous to control because she doesn't flinch when others withdraw attention, affection, or support. She doesn't chase, she replaces. This kind of self-sufficiency doesn't mean she's cold or detached. It means she's aware. She gives out of abundance, not fear. She connects because she wants to, not because she has to. And that choice makes every relationship with her real, not transactional. The moment someone tries to manipulate her through her emotions, her silence becomes her statement. She's simply no longer invested in proving her value to anyone who tries to use it against her. By removing her value from the equation, she removes their power completely. And that's when the controller realizes the brutal truth. She was never the one who needed them. They were the ones addicted to her independence. Number 4. She treats manipulators like expired lessons. When a Sigma female starts treating manipulators like expired lessons, it marks the moment she fully graduates from the emotional games that once consumed her. She no longer carries resentment, only recognition. Every manipulator she's met has, in some twisted way, taught her something. How to read silence, how to detect insincerity, how to trust her instincts over promises. But once the lesson is learned, the teacher becomes irrelevant. That's how she sees manipulators, not as threats, but as outdated chapters in her story that no longer hold her attention. She's not bitter because bitterness still gives them power. Instead, she operates from quiet detachment. She knows they function on control, and control feeds on emotional reaction. So she starves them with indifference. She doesn't argue, doesn't try to expose them, doesn't even warn others anymore. She simply lets their own behavior do the revealing. Her calm dismantles them faster than confrontation ever could. The Sigma female understands something most people don't. Manipulators are just people stuck in a lower stage of emotional evolution. They control because they fear losing relevance. They deceive because honesty would expose their fragility. Once she sees that, she stops personalizing their behavior. It's no longer, "They did this to me." It becomes, "They showed me where I've outgrown them." That shift in mindset is her freedom. When she encounters them again, she doesn't seek closure. She's already closed that door internally. Their words sound rehearsed, their games predictable, their energy stale. It's like trying to reread a book that no longer challenges your mind. There's no anger left, only clarity. And that clarity is what makes her untouchable. She sees manipulators for what they are, outdated teachers from a lesson she's already mastered. They taught her boundaries, discernment, and emotional independence. Now she carries those lessons like armor, not wounds. The beautiful irony? Manipulators think they've left a mark on her, but in reality, she's the one who used their chaos to refine her wisdom. To her, they're not enemies. They're just reminders of how far she's evolved, and how little she needs to return to where they still stand. Number 5. She emotionally evaporates without warning. When a Sigma female emotionally evaporates, it's not a reaction. It's a decision that was quietly forming long before anyone saw it coming. She doesn't storm out, she doesn't announce it, and she doesn't dramatize the moment. She simply detaches. One day, you're having the same conversations, sharing the same space, and the next, she's no longer there. Not physically, but emotionally. Her laughter no longer reaches her eyes, her attention no longer stays, and her energy becomes unreachable. It's like the light is still on, but the soul that powered it has left the room. What most people don't realize is that her evaporation is a form of self-preservation. She's learned that arguing with controllers is like negotiating with a wall that only listens to its own echo. So instead of fighting, she disappears, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. She knows control can't exist without reaction. The moment she withdraws her energy, the manipulator loses their fuel. It's a silent rebellion, one that confuses and disarms them far more than confrontation ever could. She doesn't owe anyone closure because her silence is the closure. By the time she leaves emotionally, she's already processed the disappointment, accepted the truth, and detached her identity from the situation. The person trying to control her won't see it coming because she's still polite, still calm, still present, just not invested. They'll keep trying to trigger the old emotional responses, but what they'll get instead is neutrality. And that neutrality hurts worse than anger because it means she's already gone. Her emotional evaporation is the ultimate boundary. It's her saying, "You can't reach me where I've grown." It's not revenge, it's release. Because once she emotionally detaches, there's no door back in. You can apologize, cry, or change, but she won't return to a space where she had to shrink to fit. Her silence isn't coldness, it's closure delivered with grace. And when she's gone, she leaves behind a haunting calm that reminds everyone just how powerful absence can be when it belongs to someone who once gave everything. Number 6. She begins to speak in codes, not explanations. When a Sigma female starts speaking in codes instead of explanations, it's a clear signal that she's done feeding manipulation with clarity. She's learned that manipulators don't actually want understanding. They want ammunition. Every explanation becomes a resource they twist. Every honest answer becomes a handle they use to pull control tighter. So she stops giving them material to work with. Her language becomes short, measured, and impossible to decode emotionally. She speaks just enough to be polite, never enough to be predictable. This shift is subtle but powerful. It's not about rudeness, it's about conservation. She saves her energy for those who deserve transparency. With manipulators, every word becomes currency, and she refuses to fund her own manipulation. Her replies become minimal because she knows silence confuses control. The manipulator can't find an entry point when there's no emotional tone to exploit. They'll search for signs of guilt, empathy, or frustration, but all they get is calm ambiguity. That neutrality drives them insane because it exposes how dependent their control was on her emotional responses. When she starts speaking in codes, she's no longer communicating for validation. She's communicating for boundaries. Her tone stays steady, her words precise, but the warmth is gone. It's a language of protection, not connection. The more the manipulator presses, the shorter her sentences get. Okay. Noted. That's fine. Each response feels like a locked door, polite on the surface but sealed with intent. This behavior doesn't come from coldness, it comes from clarity. She's learned that truth doesn't need to be explained to those committed to misunderstanding it. And she knows that the more she explains herself, the more she dilutes her power. So she chooses mystery over exposure, silence over persuasion. Her coded responses create distance without drama. It's not that she's avoiding communication, she's elevating it to a level the manipulator can't reach. And by the time they realize she's no longer speaking their language, she's already disengaged emotionally. The Sigma female's words become shields, not bridges. She doesn't need to be understood anymore. She just needs to stay free. Number 7. She reduces emotional access like oxygen. When a Sigma female reduces emotional access, she's not being cruel. She's reclaiming control in the most elegant way possible. She understands that emotional access is a privilege, not a right, and once it's abused, it doesn't get restored. Control thrives on reaction, on knowing they can push a button and get a response. So she quietly rewires the system. No more visible anger, no visible pain, no visible attachment. She removes the emotional oxygen manipulators need to breathe, and suddenly their dominance begins to suffocate under its own weight. She's learned that energy is power, and whoever can control where it flows controls the relationship. So she stops feeding the chaos. She doesn't argue, doesn't justify, and doesn't engage in emotional theatrics. The person trying to control her starts realizing they can't reach her anymore. Every guilt trip falls flat. Every attempt to provoke her dies in silence. Her calm isn't passivity, it's precision. She's starving the manipulation by refusing to provide emotional nutrition. The shift is devastating to controllers because they feed on emotional energy, whether love, rage, or tears. When all of that disappears, they lose their sense of power. They start over-talking, overreacting, overcompensating, trying to provoke something, anything, that will make her respond like before. But she doesn't. She's already moved beyond the need to explain or prove her point. Her silence becomes the loudest boundary they've ever faced. What makes this even more unsettling is her serenity. She's not distant out of spite. She's peaceful out of clarity. Once she sees how control operates, she can't unsee it. And once she recognizes someone's addiction to dominance, she no longer entertains it. Her emotions now operate on a selective access system, earned, not demanded. Controllers eventually crumble under that calm because their game only works when there's drama. Without her reaction, they lose their script. That's when they realize the painful truth. They were never in control of her, only of her attention. And now that she's reclaimed it, they can't breathe without it. Her absence of emotion becomes her most powerful presence. Number 8. She starts treating the controller like a case study. When a Sigma female starts treating the controller like a case study, the emotional dynamic flips completely. What was once a relationship turns into quiet research. She no longer feels anger, sadness, or disappointment, only curiosity. The person trying to control her becomes data. Every tone, every lie, every manipulation attempt is recorded and analyzed in her mind. It's not cruelty, it's clarity. Once she's seen their intention, her empathy shuts off and her observation begins. The connection isn't emotional anymore, it's diagnostic. This shift is unnerving to controllers because they're used to feeding off emotional responses. They thrive on attention, argument, and validation. But now, instead of passion, they're met with silence and an analyzing gaze that sees right through their facade. It's the same look a scientist gives a predictable experiment, calm, unimpressed, almost bored. They can sense the change but can't identify when it happened. That's because it didn't happen suddenly. It happened the moment she stopped seeing them as equals. She doesn't confront, she collects. She watches how they twist truth, how they shift blame, how they disguise control as care. She observes the insecurity behind the arrogance, the fear behind the manipulation. And once she fully understands their pattern, she mentally detaches. From that point forward, every word she speaks is deliberate. She no longer reacts. She responds with precision, designed to reveal their weaknesses further. The more they try to provoke her, the more she studies their desperation like a researcher watching predictable animal behavior. What's brutal is that she no longer sees them as a threat, just a study in immaturity. Her detachment feels like punishment because it strips them of what they crave most, emotional power. The controller starts to sense that the roles have reversed. They're no longer dominating, they're being decoded. And that realization eats away at them because they know she's documenting their patterns, perhaps even silently laughing at their predictability. By the time she's done observing, she's already emotionally gone. The case is closed, the lessons learned, and the person who thought they were manipulating her becomes nothing more than a note in her mental archive. Proof that once she understands someone's control tactics, they lose all control over her forever. Number 9. She forces people to face themselves through her calm. When a Sigma female stays calm in the face of control, it's not submission, it's psychological mastery. Controllers expect conflict because it keeps them in charge of the emotional tempo. They want shouting, tears, defensiveness, anything that proves they still have the power to affect you. But the Sigma female's calm dismantles that entire system. She doesn't feed the chaos, she stands still within it. And that stillness becomes unbearable for the manipulator because her silence reflects back everything they're trying to hide from themselves. Her calm is surgical. It cuts through the noise and exposes insecurity without a single word. She doesn't retaliate or over-explain. She just watches. The controller starts realizing they're no longer in control of the narrative. They start fidgeting, overreacting, accusing her of being cold or emotionless. But what's really happening is projection. They're staring into the mirror she's holding up and seeing their own instability magnified. Her peace exposes their chaos. Her restraint reveals their desperation. And her quiet makes their insecurity echo louder than ever. The Sigma female knows that emotional turbulence only benefits the manipulator, so she denies them the satisfaction of seeing her unravel. That denial drives them insane, because it robs them of their illusion of power. They can't provoke her, can't confuse her, can't get her to validate their behavior through reaction. They're forced to sit with themselves, and that's the one thing controllers can't stand. Her calm is a form of dominance disguised as serenity. It's not passive, it's power expressed in silence. While they scramble to regain control, she remains anchored, watching them implode under the weight of their own tactics. The more composed she stays, the more their insecurity becomes undeniable, until they can't blame her for their discomfort anymore. They have to face their own reflection. By refusing to play their emotional games, she exposes the truth they spend their lives avoiding. Control is just fear wearing confidence as a mask. And when her calm strips that mask away, they're left standing in front of their own fragility, no longer able to hide it, and no longer able to control her. Number 10. She turns boundaries into walls of consequence. When a Sigma female turns her boundaries into walls of consequence, it means she's done negotiating with disrespect. She's no longer interested in having her limits understood. She expects them to be honored. To her, a boundary isn't a suggestion or a discussion, it's a condition of access. Once it's crossed, she doesn't yell, she doesn't debate, and she doesn't threaten. She simply enforces the consequence, immediate, firm, and final. The people around her often mistake her quietness for leniency, but that's their first mistake. Her silence is the space she gives before she locks the door. Sigma females operate with precision. They give subtle warnings through energy, through changes in tone, through reduced engagement. But when those cues are ignored, she doesn't repeat herself. She removes herself. To her, explaining a boundary after it's been crossed is redundant. You already showed her that her peace wasn't a priority to you, so now she shows you what that costs. Access, permanently. She's learned that consequences speak louder than emotional appeals. Words can be manipulated, but distance cannot. The moment she pulls back, she does it cleanly. No guilt, no drama, no lingering attachment. The person who violated her trust will suddenly find themselves talking to a wall of silence, replaying every ignored warning, and realizing too late that the explanation was embedded in her behavior all along. What makes her terrifying to manipulators is her consistency. Once a boundary becomes a wall, there's no climbing it. She won't revisit old wounds for closure. She won't respond to emotional bait, and she won't reopen doors she's already sealed. She operates from a place of deep self-respect, and that self-respect doesn't bend to apologies or promises of change. Her consequences are not about revenge, they're about equilibrium. She understands that peace requires pruning, removing anyone who treats her limits as negotiable. And when she enforces those walls, she does it with eerie calmness, not anger. That calmness is what makes it sting, because when a Sigma female finally cuts access, it's not to punish you, it's to protect the version of herself that refuses to be disrespected twice. Number 11. She converts emotional manipulation into clarity. When a Sigma female converts emotional manipulation into clarity, she reaches a level of awareness most people never touch. She stops reacting to control and starts reading it. Every manipulation attempt becomes a revelation, a clear view into someone's hidden fear. She begins to understand that behind dominance lies insecurity, behind gaslighting lies fragility, And behind control lies a desperate need for relevance. Once she sees that truth, manipulation loses its emotional weight. She's no longer offended by it. She's educated by it. Instead of internalizing people's tactics, she decodes them. When someone guilt-trips her, she doesn't feel guilty. She sees a person terrified of losing influence. When someone uses silent treatment, she doesn't chase. She observes how discomfort exposes their dependence on her attention. Her mind becomes sharper, her emotions calmer, and her perception deeper. She realizes that control is rarely about power. It's about fear dressed as authority. And when you can see the fear, you can't be controlled by it. This transformation makes her emotionally bulletproof. She no longer takes manipulation as an attack on her worth. She sees it as proof of her strength. If people are trying to control her, it's because her freedom exposes their weakness. That understanding turns pain into perspective. Instead of asking, "Why would they do this to me?" she asks, "What does this reveal about them?" That single shift gives her full power back. What's remarkable is how calm she becomes. She stops reacting to emotional bait entirely. Her peace unnerves manipulators because it shows she's not inside their game anymore. She's watching it from above. They'll try the same tactics, but she no longer engages because clarity is her shield. She knows how to recognize emotional traps before they close, and she steps aside every time. The more they try to twist her emotions, the clearer she sees the truth. She doesn't hate them. She just outgrows the illusion. And when she reaches that clarity, there's nothing left to control, because control can only survive where confusion lives. Once she replaces confusion with awareness, she becomes untouchable. Number 12. She mirrors the controller's tactics back at them. When a Sigma female mirrors a controller's tactics back at them, she's not stooping to their level. She's showing them what it feels like to live in their own chaos. It's a psychological counterstrike wrapped in calm precision. She doesn't do it to win a petty game. She does it to expose the truth in a way words never could. She knows some people can't understand the pain they cause until they experience it reflected right back at them. So she becomes their mirror. If they withdraw affection to gain power, she mirrors that withdrawal. Suddenly, their silence no longer holds weight, because hers is louder, colder, and far more controlled. If they manipulate through guilt, she subtly lets them taste the emptiness of being ignored by the very person they thought they could control. If they twist words, she mirrors the same tone and ambiguity, not to confuse, but to reveal how disorienting it feels. The controller begins to see their own tactics stripped of justification, and that realization shakes them more than confrontation ever could. Her mirroring is quiet but surgical. She knows that direct confrontation feeds control. It gives manipulators an audience. So instead she flips the script with emotional precision. She becomes their reflection. Detached when they're manipulative, logical when they're emotional, indifferent when they seek reaction. The result? Their own tactics start imploding under their reflection. It's disarming because she's not fighting them. She's simply letting them wrestle with themselves. This method is not about revenge. It's about awareness. The Sigma female uses reflection as a mirror of truth, and truth is something manipulators can't survive. They depend on confusion and emotional leverage, but when they see their behavior reflected in someone who doesn't flinch, their control system breaks down. They start questioning themselves, doubting their power, feeling the discomfort they've spent years avoiding. By mirroring, she doesn't just stop manipulation. She educates through experience. It's a silent lesson. This is what you've been doing. This is what it feels like. And once they see it clearly, they can't unsee it. Her reflection becomes their reckoning. Calm, unbothered, and absolutely impossible to manipulate ever again. When people try to control a Sigma female, they don't realize they're triggering her evolution. Every attempt to manipulate her, silence her, or dominate her only refines her self-awareness. She studies it, dissects it, and transforms it into wisdom. What begins as someone else's attempt to confine her ends with her, becoming even more untouchable. She learns, adapts, and upgrades until control no longer finds an entrance. By the time manipulators notice what's happening, she's already built an entire world where their tactics don't work anymore. The Sigma female doesn't fight control with aggression, she defeats it with understanding. Her power isn't in shouting or proving her strength, it's in mastering her peace. She knows how to let silence speak, how to let detachment cut deeper than confrontation, and how to make her absence louder than any argument. That's her brilliance. She doesn't destroy her enemies, she dissolves their illusion of power. She doesn't expose manipulators with words, she lets their own behavior do the revealing. In a world obsessed with dominance, she's proof that real power is internal. You can't threaten someone who isn't afraid of loss. You can't manipulate someone who doesn't need validation, and you can't control someone whose peace doesn't depend on approval. The Sigma female has learned to stand alone, and that's why no one stands above her. She's not unkind, but she's uninterested in surrendering her freedom for comfort. Every time someone tries to test her limits, they end up teaching her how to strengthen them. And that's the ultimate irony. Those who try to own her only help her evolve beyond ownership. She becomes quieter, wiser, freer. Her reactions turn into reflections, her boundaries into walls of consequence, and her calm into power so pure that even control bows before it. The Sigma female doesn't just escape manipulation, she transcends it. If this message resonates with you, don't just watch, be part of the movement. Subscribe to the channel, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and like this video if you felt that fire of recognition. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone fighting to reclaim their own power, share it with them. Because the world needs more people who choose freedom over control, clarity over chaos, and peace over performance.